get some sense of electability and accountability into the Senate.
Okay, let me just recognize right now what many people on Twitter are saying to me, and many of you at home watching this program may be concerned about, and that is the wildfires going on in Fort McMurray. We recognize that we need to cover this story. We will be doing that. We have reporters on the ground. It is not the easiest thing to get a live signal on the ground from Fort McMurray, so we'll bring you an update on that from Toronto and on the ground. The Premier of Alberta, Rachel Notley, will be giving us an update at about 6:45 Eastern Time. Let me tell you what we know right now. This is not a desire to ignore this story. We are trying to get as much pictures and information to you as it becomes available, but it is not always that easy to turn live TV around. So here's what we can tell you right now. There are at this hour 10 communities in Fort McMurray under mandatory evacuation. That town is about 100,000 people. We also know that Highway 63 is blocked. The fire has jumped that highway, making it very difficult for some people to get out of town. And we understand that that is indeed the only way to get out of town. Let me tell you what neighborhoods are right now on a mandatory evacuation notice. Abasand, Beacon Hill, Deaconsfield, Grayling Terrace, Wood Buffalo, Thickwood, Gregoire Waterways, and Centennial Trailer Park. Reporters on the ground have told us that a number of homes have gone up in flames. They are on fire at this hour. The mayor of Fort McMurray has said that a number of evacuations are underway and others are coming. Be calm, be prepared, she says, Melissa Blake. Be ready to move politely in traffic to a safe destination. Okay, as promised, let's go to our breaking news desk in Toronto, where we are tracking the story for now until we can get some of our reporters who are working under very extreme conditions, obviously, through traffic, indeed, to try and get to this situation and update us when possible. But Steve Niles in Toronto has been tracking this story for us. Give us a sense, repeat anything I've said there, Steve, but anything else you may know about what's happening right now.
To reiterate something that you mentioned, Rosie, I want to give a little bit more information for somebody who may be watching this, who's in Fort McMurray, the communities that are now under a mandatory evacuation order. To go over them, I'm touching on something you said, but it bears repeating. Thickwood, Gregoire, Abasand, Grayling Terrace, Beacon Hill, Waterways, and Centennial Trailer Park. Now, as you mentioned, Rosie, as well, very difficult to get out. So there are some specific information that officials are telling residents there to follow to help fulfill this evacuation order. If you are evacuating from Abasand and Grayling Terrace, you should go to the reception center at McDonald Island at 1CA Knight Way. Residents evacuating from Beacon Hill, Gregoire, and Centennial Park should go to Anzac Recreation Center. Residents evacuating from Thickwood should go to Noralta Lodge, which is 21 kilometers north of Fort McMurray, across from the Suncor overpass. That is the information that we have. Now, I mentioned that residents are being asked to go north. That's the highway I hear is blocked. You can't go south from certain areas. That's why they are saying where to go. Another thing you touched on as well, Rosie, Highway 63, it is the main drag. It is the main north-south route through Fort McMurray. And one of the things that officials were worried about is that fire that had been burning on the western part of the community, it has breached the highway, meaning it's jumped over. So anyone on this side of the highway, that is why there's this mandatory evacuation, or people are being urged to get out immediately and head to those evacuation centers that I listed.
Okay, and I should just say that a tweet from Emergency Services from about 5 minutes ago says that the entire lower town site or downtown is now also under a mandatory evacuation, except for McDonald Island Park, and then all the other places that you've now listed, which I would imagine now, Steve, not as someone that doesn't know Fort McMurray very well at all, we are now looking at all of downtown under a mandatory evacuation, as well as these neighborhoods where these houses are. And certainly our reporters that are on the ground there say that they are hearing explosions, that they are seeing an enormous amount of fire, and that things are backed up on that highway that you talked about as well.
Yeah, and one of the concerns, I mean, the difficulty of getting some of the people on the ground there is that they too are having to pull back. I saw some tweets from our colleagues there, Briar Stewart in particular, who said that they were saying, no, we have to sort of head on back. So that's one of the reasons why it's been so difficult to get to these people, or to speak to our people who are on the ground right there. And understanding that it's a small community by some Canadian standards, but we're talking about 100,000 people. And when half the city is currently under an evacuation order, you can understand, obviously, this is a very serious situation. One other note to pass along, we're expecting Rachel Notley to speak. I think the time was 4:45 Eastern, or excuse me, local time, 6:45 Eastern, so just a little bit more than half an hour from this point.
And again, Fort McMurray, obviously not a huge city, about 100,000 people who live there. Many of them have been told now at this hour by emergency services in the city, do not go back to your home if you are under this mandatory evacuation alert. Don't try and go and collect pets or anybody or anything else. Just get on the highway and get out. The problem for them right now, though, is that the highway has also become backed up with traffic. That's, as you said, why our reporters are having a hard time getting there, and is also dangerous. If you look on Twitter, people are tweeting some very dramatic pictures of what they're encountering as they try and leave the city. But the mayor of that city asking everyone to be calm, polite, and try and get out safely. Again, as someone who hasn't been to Fort McMurray, it is a city, though, that is surrounded by trees. There is not a lot of ways in or out of that city, just that one highway. And so unless you're in your car, the only other way out would be by air. And I imagine that there's a lot of people feeling a little bit worried tonight, certainly. And as you rightly say, the Premier is going to update us on this situation very soon. And we will have people on the ground on the phone just as soon as we can as well. Steve, I'm going to let you check into where things are at, and we'll check back with you very shortly. That's Steve Niles at the CBC Breaking News Desk.